Hello, my name is John. Welcome to a Gamester81 review. In this video, I'll be reviewing BurgerTime World Tour, which is published by Konami and developed by Monkey Paw. This game came out in 2011, November, and is released for both Xbox Live Arcade for 800 Microsoft points and PlayStation Network for $9.99. This is one of the many sequels, starting with the original BurgerTime arcade game developed and published by Konami, and that arcade game came out in 1982. It makes me feel old thinking about that. The game is coming up on 30 years. It's a timeless classic, one of my favorite arcade games. So I was really super excited to hear that there was a new revamp and a new game in the series coming out that Monkey Paw was going to release. Not many people know about a lot of the other sequels, so just a brief recap over the BurgerTime franchise, as you will. We're going to start with BurgerTime Arcade, which came out in 1982. Eventually, a couple years later, 1984, Data East decided to release a sequel, which is called Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory. That game didn't do very well, unfortunately, because it was during the peak of the video game crash, which started in 1983. They were going to also release Pizza Time, which never came out, unfortunately, due to the crash as well. Also in 1984, they released a game for the Intellivision called Diner, which is a great port, only ported to the Intellivision, exclusive to that system. If you have an Intellivision, I highly recommend you guys check out Diner for that system. It's one of my favorite games on the system. Eventually, they would release Super Burger Time, which is a updated graphics, introduced Peter Pepper Jr., which is the son of Peter Pepper, the main character. It was the first time that you could actually jump in the game. It had updated graphics and sound. It was a lot of fun playing that game. Also, eventually the Game Boy would see Burger Time Deluxe, which is a really fun Game Boy port. And Namco would take over this series in 2007 and release Burger Time Delight, which is a good mobile game. And that brings us to Burger Time World Tour that was released this past year. Burger Time World Tour is a fun 3D platforming game that has some puzzle elements, that introduces new enemies, new power-ups, and is a lot of fun. So let's take a closer look. I'm playing this on the Xbox 360. First thing I noticed when I booted up this game was the theme song from the original Burger Time. That brought back a lot of good memories of the original arcade. I thought that was a really cool touch. This isn't the remake from the original, it's a completely new game. And Burger Time World Tour has several game options. You can play single player, which has 4 worlds, 9 stages per world. You also have online multiplayer and local multiplayer. I've noticed every time I try to go online playing multiplayer, no one was playing, unfortunately. That's too bad. But you can play as Peter Pepper. You can also play as your avatar, which I think is a really cool touch. There's a story to this game. You're Peter Pepper, and you have 4 main guys, your enemies who are trying to compete against you. Your goal is to complete the stages and to defeat your competitor. If you've played any other Burger Time prior to this one, you'll catch on to the gameplay fairly quickly. The object is to avoid your enemies while stacking burgers. And to stack burgers, you got to walk over the items, like a bun or a patty. You have new weapons, like a spatula, which you can collect, which will wipe out your enemy complete like that. Or you can also walk over an item of the burger and smash your enemy below you. Now you also have, just like the original Burger Time, you have this pepper, which you can use, which will temporarily stun your enemy. I call it pepper spray. And as you can see there, it dropped twice because I had an enemy on top of the bun. Usually the item will only drop once, so you can collect more points doing that, and it's a lot faster. This game is timed, but there's no time limit in Burger Time World Tour. All the classic enemies are in this game, including the Mr. Hot Dog, Frankfurter, Mr. Pickle, which he'll jump and kill you. You can't jump over him. I guess in other words, you can say I got into a little pickle in that situation. There's also Mr. Egg, which he'll run in and attack you, which you gotta avoid. I guess you can call him a scrambled egg. But throughout the game, there's a whole bunch of different bonuses. You can collect letters and spell the word burger. And these are only in certain stages, but when you do this, you can get an extra life, which actually adds kind of a nice element to the game. Other than just worrying about stacking burgers, you can worry about the mini games within the game. One very unique aspect of this game were the boss battles. Kind of surprised me that there were boss battles in a Burger Time game, but I thought it really added to it. The bosses are challenging. You don't directly attack the bosses, but you indirectly attack them by completing burgers and avoiding enemies and jumping on platforms, and it's very rewarding feeling, to be honest with you, because the bosses do get challenging throughout the game. Each new world adds new enemies, new power-ups, new challenges. In this particular world, this is Mexico, you have new enemies, including a pepper. You also have this power-up, which is a soda, which will make you temporarily invisible and make you run really fast. This is my least favorite power-up because it's really hard to control, especially if you're jumping on platform to platform. But the pepper's interesting because when you stun him, he helps you blow up. So you gotta be very careful as where you are when you do that. Another interesting power-up is this rocket jet. This rocket jet is only temporarily. You can use it by pushing B, and you gotta be careful because you gotta avoid these spikes in certain areas. The one thing that's kind of interesting about the game I don't really care for is when you're falling, it's hard to see beneath you, and it's really easy to die, so you gotta be careful. It's almost one of those trial by error things by trying it several times, and once you kind of memorize where the spikes are, you're okay. France is another world in this game where there's new enemies, including this carrot that will drill up and he'll actually run at you. You gotta be careful. You gotta be aware of where he's at. You'll notice that the camera is zoomed out. You can see there's a lot going on at one time. It's confusing at first when you're playing this game because there's so much going on, but it didn't take me too long to get used to it. You also have another power up here, which is a icicle, like frozen ice. If you use it, you can temporarily freeze your enemies and avoid run right through them, which can be very helpful at times of the game. As the game progresses, there are new platforms introduced, including these barrel rolls. But one thing that's very helpful is no matter where you're at in the game, it shows you where the next burger is. You can see in the left there, it shows you where to go. I always find the best strategy is to go to the very top and complete all the buttons at the very top and kind of work your way down. Here's what I'm talking about in a situation where you're following, you don't necessarily know where you're going, and it's really easy to die in that situation. Another tip that I've used to rack up more points is to always kill an enemy and walk over a platform to make them fall and get more points by doing that, especially if you have a pepper in the stage, because if you have a pepper and they fall into the burger is going to become a southwest burger and catch on fire. So I'll pepper spray the enemies there, and they'll drop and the burger catches on fire. They have to be on the item that you're walking across. They can't get beneath it because they'll die. It won't count as part of the burger. Japan is the final world and by far the hardest. You have ice, which is easy to slip on and hard to gain traction for. You also have these buttons that will flame at you once you cross it, so you gotta be aware of what's around you. There is a new enemy in Japan, which I believe is a sushi roll. And he'll roll and he'll kind of fart and you temporarily get stunned. And it's easy to die when that happens because you're vulnerable. Japan is also home of one of my favorite power-ups, which is the hot sauce. It's kind of hard to find, but once you find it and you use it, it kills all enemies on the screen at one time, which is really, really cool. Overall, BurgerTime World Tour is a nice retro evolution of the original arcade. It takes nice samples from the original arcade, including some original enemies and the overall concept, but it really adds a lot of new elements, including power-ups, new enemies, new platforms that makes this game unique in its own. There are 3 things that you guys need to be aware of BurgerTime World Tour before you play it. First, the zoomed out camera angle and all this stuff going on. It can kind of be sensory overload at first and kind of get confusing, but that doesn't take too long to get over. Second, when you're jumping platform to platform and using your pepper spray to stun your enemy, there are times when the enemy, even though you're pepper spraying him, one gets stunned, which is kind of frustrating. And third, when you're following, it's hard to see where you're going, so you gotta be aware of that. It's kind of a trial by error thing. But those are 3 really minor things. This is overall a really fun game. And you know what? After doing this review, I'm kind of craving some burgers. We'll see you guys soon. Take care. Hello Star Wars fans, how you doing? My name is John. Welcome back to another Star Wars review. In this episode, this is part 2 of my Star Wars Micro Machines video reviews. I did a first part where I reviewed some of the vehicles for Star Wars member. Hey Star Wars fans, how you doing? My name is John and welcome back to another Star Wars review. This is part 2 of my Star Wars Micro Machine videos. First part I reviewed some of the vehicles. I did some of these playsets up front. This video I'm going to talk over these playsets right here, these fold out playsets.